playing music, you remember, man, one of the first, concerts I did was at the barn.
I don't think there's another time in history where a group of kids in high school experienced history being made and will live forever like it was back then. It was just one of those groundbreaking times in life, and we were part of it.
We were changing. The world was changing. We were starting to say, oh my gosh, maybe we have a voice, and maybe that voice will be stronger if we all come here on Friday nights to share this experience.
Thank you very much. Here we can shortly.
The teenagers of the 1960s and 70s grew up listening to some of the greatest musical acts ever. The Beatles, the Jackson 5, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, the Beach Boys, Janis Joplin, artists that left their mark on an entire generation. The youth of Naperville were drawn to the barn to listen to their music.
This was the place to be. It was kind of like the Tonight Show of the western suburbs. It was a lot of fun.
The bands weren't playing to the arenas and didn't have, we didn't have $100 tickets back then. And you could see 4 and 5 bands in a night, the old reviews, where bands would travel together, They're exciting times, and the barn was just a great venue.
I was fortunate to play with all of the people here in town at one time or another, and the talent, oh my gosh, even looking at it now, the talent that was in this town and is still in this town musically, to me is an absolute amazement. To have that miracle of the live experience, and to see Summit like Ides of March and the Crying Shames and people like that came through here, and to see them in your own backyard, oh my gosh, how cool was that?
People weren't made of money back then. We really scraped the bottom of the barrel to come up with $3 to go see Led Zeppelin in Westmont when they played there. And it's like, $3, that's 4 weeks allowance, No, you couldn't afford that, but you could afford 75 cents at the door and go in and have a good time with your friends.
Live music was where it was at. Everybody wanted to see a band. Everybody wanted to go out and see a band. And it really did start here.
5 students from Naperville Community High School had the idea to create The Barn. With support for the idea from all over the community and as high up as Mayor Zeniger, these students went to work, recruiting like-minded teens to get their vision built.
The 5 originating folks were there with a little stick model of the barn and just sort of gave a little presentation about what it was they were trying to do and where the idea came from. And you might, well, yeah, this sounds good. Let's go ahead and get involved.
There wasn't really any place else after the Y where people could go. This was the place where they could meet that wasn't a classroom. It was just a place on the weekends where kids could meet, hear the music they wanted to hear, dance if they felt like dancing, and everybody kind of got protective about it. It was our spot.
And soon there was a groundswell of support for a youth center. But it was the students of Naperville Community High School that did the work.
The high school kids sold bonds to build the barn. And I have here one of the original bonds. This is a $50 bond.
I sold bonds in denominations of $25 and $50, which doesn't seem like a lot of money now, but back in 1965, you were asking people you didn't know to commit themselves for 10 years to build a youth center.
It was a good investment, and it was because it was in the youth. It wasn't in the money, it was in our youth.
The funds raised now began the building. All through the summer of 1965, student volunteers worked side by side with professional builders to see their dream of a youth center reach further and further into the sky.
They announced a couple of student work days where students that wanted to come out and maybe weren't selling bonds, but they wanted to help, were shown by brick masons how to actually put that mortar on there and lay bricks. And a lot of kids came out here and volunteered their time on the weekends to help get it built.
I'm not sure, even if you wanted to, that we'd be allowed to do this now. I mean, there are pictures of us standing on these flimsy cleats that have been, nailed into the roof of the barn, putting up tongue and groove and shingles, and it's like, OSHA would have a freaking nightmare. I mean, I think if my mom had ever gone out there and seen me, walking along the roof of this structure, 30 feet up, I'm not sure she would have let me keep going. But it's not something that most kids get to do. Most of the time when you're that age, you're cruising up and down, well, back then it was Ogden Avenue, from the A&W to the Dog and Suds and back and forth. And we got to actually create something that literally lasted a lifetime.
The barn opened in December of 1965 and could barely hold the crowd that surged in for the inaugural dance.
I recall there were tables and stuff, so if you wanted to talk to someone, there was quiet places. So you had it all. You could watch, you could dance, you could hang and be with friends. It was really well designed.
The class of '66 had an ulterior motive for getting the barn completed on time. With the theme, Meet Me at the Fair, the newly finished barn was the site of the graduating seniors' prom, the only prom to be held underneath the rafters.
One of the things the kids did was to get ladders and go up there and sling ropes all the way down to the floor and make swings. Ladies would come in with their prom dresses and sit in the swing, and we had an ice cream social, and it was kind of a new thing for proms.
Many local bands got their start at the barn, giving some Naperville youth their first taste of stardom.
We would just get our guitars and bass and drums and do whatever we'd listen to songs, try to emulate it as best we could, turn our amplifiers up and be as loud and all that. And this was a place we could do that.
Electric live local rock music was still relatively new. When you could imitate a good Chicago or LA rock band and have the guitars and the drum and the harmonies and try to hit that song that they'd been listening to on WLS or CFL all the time, they just went crazy.
For me, it was what kept me away from drugs. It gave me a sense of self. It gave me music gave me everything. And it started here.
When people were out there clapping, smiling, why would you not want to do that for a long time?
The kids who came of age during the time of the barn found it left its mark on them. In 2010, many of them returned to pay homage to those Friday and Saturday nights of their youth. Local bands that graced the stage back in the barn's heyday once again performed their hearts out.
The talent still, rock and roll is ageless, I'm here to tell you, because these guys that are 60 are putting it out there.
When we got together 5 years ago for barn stock, this place was packed. And it was everybody during that time. It was one of the most fun nights I've had ever.
For a band, it was big. It was a really nice big stage, rather than playing in somebody's basement or a garage, of course. And the sun would set off the west wall, and then as the sun went down, the lights would dim, and the whole, tenor would change in the room, and the music would get better. And yeah, so I think it's a time in everybody's life, and I think everybody's sad to see it go.